While I lay unconscious in Houston General's ICU, my son was popping champagne at his engagement party. He posted a photo in a velvet tuxedo holding a glass of Dom Perignon with the caption, "Finally free. New beginnings." 412 people liked it. 0 visited room 312. Now tell me something. Have you ever realized too late that the person you loved most saw your existence as a burden? My name is Richard Mallory, 72 years old, founder of Mallory Systems, a tech firm I built from a 2-car garage in Dallas to a $5 million software empire. For most of my life, I believed success could buy loyalty. It couldn't. It only rented it. I'd spent decades raising my only son. Evan paid for his private schools, his Harvard MBA, his $160,000 Bentley, and his penthouse overlooking Clyde Warren Park. His mother, God rest her soul, used to say, "Don't spoil the boy Richard. Love makes strong men, not luxury." I thought she was being sentimental. Turns out she was prophetic. 3 months ago, I was driving home from a board meeting when a truck ran a red light on Interstate 45. Next thing I knew, nothing. Darkness. Machines breathing for me. 8 days of coma. When I finally woke, the nurse smiled kindly. "Your son's Instagram is full of good news," she said, showing me the screen. He looked so happy, and there it was. The image of Evan and his fiancée, Alyssa Browning, laughing under golden lights at the St. Regis Aspen. I recognized the venue because I had paid for it. The diamonds sparkling on her wrist, my credit card. The caption beneath it, "Freedom feels good." Freedom from me. My blood pressure monitor began to beep faster, and the nurse thought I was in pain. But I wasn't. I was just awakening. Because for the first time in 72 years, I saw the pattern clearly. Evan hadn't visited me in the hospital. He hadn't answered the nurse's calls. He hadn't even called to ask if I'd survive. But the people who did show up weren't family by blood. Linda Foster, my CFO of 20 years, arrived each morning with business reports and black coffee, my favorite. Carlos Jimenez, our maintenance supervisor, brought a fresh bouquet of lilies every afternoon. Oliver Brooks, the quiet engineer who'd written our first software code, sat beside my bed, after work laptop in hand, murmuring updates about projects, as if I could still hear him. The ICU visitor log proved what my heart already knew. They came. He didn't. 8 days in silence. And in that silence, something inside me shifted from grief to clarity. You see, I'd spent my life believing that blood made a bond, that a father's sacrifice automatically earned a son's gratitude. But as I lay under those white hospital lights, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the quiet hum of loyalty that wasn't related to me, I began to understand something else. Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does. And when loyalty dies, inheritance means nothing. So I stayed still. I didn't call him. I didn't beg. I didn't even text. I just opened my phone, found my legal app, and whispered to myself, "Let's see who deserves the life I built." Because when you've looked death in the eye, you stop protecting people who celebrate your absence. If you're watching this from anywhere in America, Texas, California, or wherever your family story began, drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. This story starts in an ICU, but trust me, it doesn't end there. The day after I woke up, the nurse brought me a stack of visitor records. She thought I might want to see who'd been by. I nodded even though I already knew the answer. The first name on the list wasn't Evan Mallory. It was Linda Foster. 20 years in my company. She started as a junior accountant when her husband walked out and left her with 2 kids and a mortgage she could barely pay. She'd written me a thank you letter back in 2003, said that when I gave her a job, I gave her back her dignity. And now, 2 decades later, she was giving it back to me. Linda came every morning at 6, sat beside my bed, laptop open, giving business updates like it was a Monday meeting. I couldn't respond, but she talked anyway. About clients, contracts, cash flow. About how the team was holding things together while I was gone. And before leaving, she'd whisper, "You're not done yet, Richard. Don't you dare leave me with these spreadsheets." Then she'd straighten my blanket and leave a cup of coffee I couldn't drink. The second name was Carlos Jimenez. I hired him 15 years ago, fresh off a construction site, barely speaking English. Back then, all he wanted was a steady paycheck and a green card. He'd earned both and my respect. Every afternoon, Carlos would stop by after his shift, carrying a thermos of homemade chicken soup. He told the nurses, "Senor Richard likes it warm." He'd sit quietly humming Spanish hymns, praying for me in a voice that filled the sterile air with something soft and holy. His calloused hands would rest gently on mine, and for a moment, the machines didn't feel so cold. The third name, Oliver Brooks. 12 years younger than Evan. Socially awkward, always late to meetings, but brilliant. He'd built the code that kept our platform alive, the one I'd mortgaged my house to fund in 2001. Oliver spent evenings in the corner chair, typing away, muttering about algorithms and updates. Sometimes he'd play soft jazz from a small Bluetooth speaker, Miles Davis' Thelonious Monk. Music that reminded me life could still move even when you couldn't. Linda, Carlos, Oliver. 3 people who owed me nothing. 3 people who showed up anyway. When the nurse left, I opened my phone and scrolled through Evan's social media. His feed was a highlight reel of self-celebration, bachelor parties in Napa, spa weekends in Palm Springs, captions about manifesting success, new chapters, and cutting negative energy. Apparently, I was the negative energy. He hadn't called once. Not when the doctors called his number 17 times. Not when the nurses left voicemails. Not when the surgeon said I might not make it through the night. And yet he had time to post, "Freedom feels good." I turned off the screen and stared at the ceiling. Funny thing about hospital ceilings, they all look the same. But when you've got 8 days to stare at one, you start seeing patterns. And the pattern in my life had been this: I gave. He took. I built. He borrowed. I trusted. He disappeared. That realization didn't break me. It built me back, brick by brick. For 72 years, I thought family meant forgiveness without question. But maybe it meant presence without condition. That night, Linda returned with a new report. Carlos brought fresh flowers from his wife's garden. Oliver brought his laptop and played me a recording of a code test, running perfectly. "It worked, Mr. Mallory," he said softly. "You'd be proud." And for the first time in 8 days, I smiled. Because pride wasn't about numbers or profits. It was about people, those who stay when you're nothing but a broken heartbeat and a hospital wristband. When the room finally went dark and the machines hummed their lonely rhythm, I closed my eyes and whispered the first prayer I'd said in years. "Lord, if you give me one more sunrise, help me use it wisely. Help me see who's mine, not by blood, but by heart." And in that sterile humming silence, I swear I felt something shift, not in the room, but in me. The phone rang at 10:15 that morning. The nurse looked startled. "It's your son," she whispered, smiling like it was good news. I nodded for her to hand it to me. My voice was still gravel, my lungs still heavy. "Dad, you're awake. That's... wow. Great timing. Great timing." That's what he said to his father, who had almost died. "Listen," he continued. "This is a little awkward, but we've got some wedding stuff to sort out. The planner's freaking out about a payment delay." I stayed silent. The machines beside me kept their rhythm steady and different. "She says the final deposits, flowers, catering, photographer have to clear by noon today. About 70 grand total. You know how these high-end places are." He laughed lightly, waiting for me to join in. I didn't. "Dad, you there?" "Yes." My voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "Have you been to see me?" A pause. The kind of silence that burns. "Hospitals make me anxious, you know that. Alyssa's been under a ton of stress, too. Her family's watching everything. Her dad's a senator, for God's sake. If something goes wrong with the payments, it'll look bad. Bad. That's what worried him, the optics." "You mean it'll look bad for your reputation?" "No, I mean for both of us, Dad. For the Mallory name. The Mallory name. The one he'd just toasted freedom from." Anyway, he continued, "I know this is a crazy time, but maybe you could call the bank or authorize me to use your estate account temporarily. It's just a technical thing." My chest tightened, not from pain, but disbelief. "Tell me something," I said. "When the doctors called 17 times, why didn't you answer?" He sighed like I was being difficult. "Dad, come on. You know I love you, but you can't expect me to drop everything every time there's a scare. You've always been tough. You'll be fine." I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting their edges. I almost died, Evan. "And you didn't," he said quickly. "So let's focus on solutions. The wedding's in 4 days, and I'm dealing with vendors who won't take IOUs. We're kind of in a time crunch." He talked like a man ordering room service, not a son speaking to his father on a hospital bed. "If something had happened to you," he added, "there could have been estate delays, probate stuff, lawyers. Honestly, it's a mess. The planner needs clarity before noon." "The planner," I repeated. He didn't catch the tone. "Yeah, I mean, obviously we're praying for your recovery, but I just need to know there won't be financial disruptions if things turn south again." The words hung there sterile and sharp. If things turn south again. He wasn't calling to check if I was alive. He was calling to ask how quickly he'd get the money if I wasn't. The nurse passed by the doorway, checking my vitals. She smiled politely. I didn't return it. "Dad, did you hear me? The wedding planner needs confirmation by 11. "You'll have your answer," I said. "So the payments will go through, they'll go through." He exhaled in relief. "Perfect. You're the best. I knew you'd come through. You always do." The line went dead before I could respond. "No, I love you. No, how are you feeling? Just business as usual." I set the phone down and stared at it, still warm from the call. 23 years of sacrifice condensed into a single transaction. For a long minute, I said nothing. Then I reached for my phone again, this time not to call anyone. I opened the Estate Manager Pro app, entered my password, and scrolled to the section labeled Will and Beneficiaries. There it was, his name first, and only above everything I owned. The company, the house, the accounts. I pressed edit. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat on the screen, waiting for me to decide. I thought about Linda's tired smile, Carlos's soup, Oliver's music, the way they'd filled the silence Evan left behind. And I whispered almost to myself, it's time to reward the people who actually showed up. I began typing. That phone call didn't just change a wedding. It changed the future of everything I'd ever built. After Evan hung up, the room went silent again, except for the steady hum of machines that seemed to breathe in rhythm with my thoughts. I stared at the ceiling, the same sterile white tiles that had been above me for 8 days, and I made a decision that would rewrite my entire legacy. Not out of revenge, not even out of anger, but out of clarity. For 72 years, I'd mistaken generosity for love and patience for loyalty. Now I understood the difference. I opened my phone again and pulled up Estate Manager Pro. The digital will appeared line by line, each word representing a lifetime of work. All assets to my son Evan Mallory. I tapped edit, and with that one click, the old life ended. The first thing I changed was the company. Mallory Systems, valued at $5 million, built from 2 decades of sweat and faith. It would no longer belong to one man's bloodline. It would belong to those who kept it alive. 48% divided equally among Linda Foster, Carlos Jimenez, and Oliver Brooks. Each share to vest over 3 years, tied to continued service. The rest, 52%, would go into an employee profit trust distributed annually among staff based on tenure and performance. No inheritance, no entitlement, just earned ownership. Then I turned to the house, a Spanish-style estate in Highland Park, worth nearly $2 million. It had 4 bedrooms, a saltwater pool, and a view of Turtle Creek that made sunsets look painted by God himself. It would go to Linda Foster. Linda, who'd spent 20 years renting an apartment with paper-thin walls and no backyard. Linda, who'd kept my company alive through every recession, every sleepless night. She deserved a home that didn't leak when it rained. The investment portfolio, nearly $900,000 in stocks and bonds, would be divided between Carlos and Oliver. Enough for Carlos to send his daughters to college without debt. Enough for Oliver to start a small lab of his own if he ever wanted to. The life insurance policy, $2 million, would seed a new foundation, the Mallory Scholarship Fund for children of immigrants and single mothers, administered by the 3 of them. And then finally, I reached Evan's name again. I deleted the old clause. Typed a new one to my son Evan Mallory. I leave $50,000 to be distributed as a single payment representing his contribution to the family enterprise. I sat there rereading it slowly. 50,000. Enough for him to start over. Enough to remind him that even love has a limit when it's one-sided. By the time I finished, the room felt different. Lighter. Like something sacred had shifted back into balance. I called James Holden, my attorney of 15 years. He arrived that evening with a notary and his ever-present leather briefcase. He looked at me with quiet respect. "Are you certain about these changes, Richard? I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He nodded once. "Then let's make it official." We went through every clause, every signature, every witness verification. The process took an hour, but I'd waited decades for that kind of peace. When James left, Linda stopped by on her way home. She didn't know what I'd done yet. She just smiled and said, "We're all rooting for you, boss." I smiled back because for the first time, boss didn't sound lonely. I turned off the hospital lights and whispered a quiet thought, not to anyone in the room, but to the God who'd given me one more chance to make things right. Thank you for waking me up literally and spiritually. Because sometimes divine intervention doesn't come as a miracle. It comes as a phone call that hurts just enough to open your eyes. If you're still listening to my story right now, type 1 in the comments. Because what comes next is where everything I built finally meets the truth about who deserves it. The morning of the wedding began like any other day in the ICU machines, humming sunlight sneaking through blinds, nurses changing shifts. Except this time, I was wide awake, sitting up, eating real food again. Coffee never tasted so honest. At 9:02 a.m., my phone started ringing. Evan. Dad. Something's wrong with the cards. His voice trembled, half panic, half disbelief. All the corporate accounts are declining. The florist's threatening to leave, the caterer says payments bounced, and the planner, she's losing it. I took a slow sip of coffee. That's strange, I said. Have you called the bank? Of course I called the bank. They said there's some kind of account restructuring in progress. They won't give me details. Dad, the ceremony's in 5 hours. Do something. The heart monitor beside me beeped in steady amusement. I said softly, maybe God's restructuring more than accounts today. He didn't even hear it. Dad, this isn't a joke. The Browning family's already at the hotel. Alyssa's father keeps asking about financial irregularities. Her mother looks like she's about to call the whole thing off. Where's the wedding again? I asked, as if I didn't already know. The Rosewood Mansion. Dad, please don't do this right now. Oh, I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm resting. There was a pause, a long, awkward silence where I could practically hear his world collapsing in real time. Dad, this is my wedding day. And 6 days ago, I said was my almost dying day, but you were busy choosing cake flavors. He said nothing, just the shallow sound of someone breathing through shame and disbelief. Look, I know I should have visited, he said finally. But you didn't, I interrupted. You visited 0 times. I was dealing with wedding stress, okay, and I was dealing with life or death stress. Guess which one Linda Foster prioritized? He groaned. Dad, can we not make this emotional? This is business. Just fix the accounts. Please. Business. I smiled faintly. Finally, something we agree on. This is business. So you'll fix it. No, Evan. I'm just adjusting it. What does that mean? It means the company doesn't fund personal weddings anymore. For a moment, all I heard was silence. Then, you can't be serious, I am. Deadly serious. Almost literally. He started yelling. I didn't stop him. I let him fill the room with noise because I'd spent my whole life filling his with comfort. Now he could have the silence he'd earned. When the call ended, I put the phone face down and enjoyed the first peaceful breakfast I'd had in weeks. Oatmeal toast and justice served hot. By 10:15 a.m., the voicemails began. First panic, then anger, then begging. Dad, please, the guests are arriving. Dad, the senator's threatening to cancel everything. Dad, you're humiliating me. No, son. You did that all by yourself. By 11:30, my attorney James Holden texted, all corporate cards officially canceled. Expense account closed. Key card access revoked. Phase 2 complete. At 12:10 p.m., my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I answered. Mr. Mallory, this is Alyssa Browning. Her voice was brittle, polished like glass that could break at any second. I don't know what's happening, but the hotel is demanding full payment. Vendors are threatening lawsuits. We have 200 guests arriving in 90 minutes. That sounds stressful, I said. Mr. Mallory, my father is a U.S. senator. My mother chairs 3 charity boards. This entire situation reflects poorly on both families. I'm sure we can resolve this quickly. Did Evan tell you why he hasn't been to the hospital? Pause. He said hospitals make him uncomfortable. Did he tell you he posted a photo captioned, "Finally free," while I was in a coma? Another pause. He said it was taken before it wasn't. Silence. Then, in a whisper barely audible, she said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Mallory." "No need," I said. "You just learned something about him I spent 72 years denying." By 1 p.m., the florist had packed up. By 1:20, the catering truck left the Rosewood driveway. By 2:00, the entire wedding was officially canceled due to unpaid invoices. Reporters got hold of it before dessert could be plated. Senator's future son-in-law faces financial meltdown. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply closed my eyes, leaned back in my hospital bed, and whispered, "Justice doesn't always need witnesses. But today it has 200. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is silence and a declined credit card at the perfect moment." At 4:17 p.m., the peace in room 312 shattered. The door slammed open so hard the metal tray rattled. Evan stood there in his tuxedo, creased undone, a glass of champagne stain across his shirt. His eyes were bloodshot. His pride cracked clean in half. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't flinch. I'd survived high-speed impact, 8 days of silence, and a lifetime of disappointment. This was nothing. "I canceled the cards," I said calmly. "The rest was gravity. You ruined my wedding, Dad. 200 people watched us get humiliated. Do you even understand what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "I taught 200 people how integrity looks when it finally stands up." He stormed closer, ignoring the beeping machines, the quiet nurse peeking through the glass. "You made me look like a fraud in front of the Brownings. Alyssa's father thinks we're broke. My fiancé left in tears," I cut in. "No, Evan. You made yourself look like a fraud. You just ran out of other people's money to hide behind." He froze for a second, then laughed bitterly. "You're insane. You're just jealous I'm building something bigger, something modern. You're stuck in the past." "Really?" I said softly. "Because from where I'm sitting, the past seems to be running your future right into the ground." At that moment, the door opened again. Linda Foster walked in holding a folder of reports. She stopped cold, taking in the scene. "Mr. Mallory, everything okay?" Evan spun toward her, snapping. "This is a private conversation." Linda's eyes narrowed. "After 20 years of service, I think I've earned the right to check on him." "You people work for him," Evan barked. "Wrong," Linda said quietly. "We work with him." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He didn't know the will had already changed. He didn't know he was already a ghost in his father's empire. Then Carlos Jimenez stepped in behind her, still in his work uniform, holding a small paper bag. "Senor Richard the Ferrier brought soup," he said gently. "You didn't eat lunch." The air in the room shifted. 3 people stood around my bed like sentinels. Family not by blood, but by choice. Evan's jaw clenched. "You're replacing me with them." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, I'm recognizing them. You replaced yourself when you stopped showing up. He shook his head, voice cracking. You're crazy. I'll fight this. I'll contest every decision you've made. On what grounds? Mental incompetence. Everyone will know you're not fit to manage your estate. I smiled. Good luck with that. Dr. Chen tested my cognition yesterday. Scored me at 97th percentile. Sharp enough to spot manipulation a mile away. He blinked, taken off guard. Then I'll get another doctor. I'll find someone who says you're unstable. Be careful, Evan. I said, my tone cold as marble. Lying in court carries consequences. The nurse had already called security. 2 officers appeared at the door. Sir, one said, turning to Evan, you need to lower your voice. Evan looked around the room. Linda steady, Carlos calm, me motionless, resolute. He saw the truth, his power was gone. The empire he thought he'd inherit had already chosen its new heirs. He pointed at me one last time, shaking with rage. This isn't over. I met his eyes, voice even. Yes, it is. Security escorted him down the hallway. The echo of his shoes faded into the sterile silence. Linda exhaled. You okay, Richard? I nodded. Better than I've been in years. Carlos set the soup on the table, his calloused hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Senor, he doesn't understand yet, but someday he will. Maybe, I said quietly. Maybe that's not for me to fix anymore. The window glowed with the soft light of sunset, the kind that paints even a hospital room in gold. And as the machines hummed, I whispered another prayer, this one not for justice, but mercy. Lord, thank you for opening my eyes. But if you have more lessons for him, please be gentler than I was. I closed my eyes, not out of exhaustion, but peace. Because sometimes faith isn't asking for miracles. It's accepting that the truth already was one. By dawn the next day, I was no longer a father in his son's eyes. I was a headline waiting to happen. At 6:43 a.m., the notification pinged on my phone. LinkedIn Evan Mallory has published a new post. I tapped it open. There it was, a wall of words, dressed up in corporate empathy, dripping with manipulation. When family illness leads to confusion, it's hard to know who to trust. My father has been acting erratically since his accident, influenced by employees who have gained inappropriate control of his company. Yesterday, he made irrational financial decisions under medical sedation, causing great personal and professional damage. If anyone has faced similar elder abuse situations, please share your advice. Polished, calculated, cowardly. The man couldn't face a hospital room, but he could face an audience of 12,000 followers. The comments came fast. Some sympathetic, some skeptical. A few old acquaintances typing cautious condolences, the kind that smell like fence-sitting. I read in silence until a name stopped me cold. Rebecca Lang, CEO of Langtech, one of our oldest partners. I've known Richard Mallory for 15 years. He's one of the sharpest, most ethical founders in Texas. If he cut you off, Evan, I'd bet every dollar it was for a reason. Then Paul Simmons, former CFO of a client firm, sounds like your father, finally learned to call things what they are. Entitlement isn't love. The tide shifted in real time. Executives, engineers, consultants all chiming in. They'd seen my name attached to charity projects, hospital donations, scholarships for single mothers. They remembered who I was, not who Evan needed me to be. By 9:00 a.m., the post had nearly 200 comments, and 90% of them defended me. Still, I didn't celebrate. I knew my son too well. When charm failed, he turned to force. At 11:30 a.m., Linda walked into my hospital room with her laptop. "Richard," she said softly, "you should see this." She turned the screen toward me. The Dallas Business Journal front page, tech founders' competence questioned amid succession scandal. They hadn't named names, but the quotes were clear, anonymous sources claiming I was being influenced by subordinates and not of sound judgment. And one line cut through everything: family members close to the situation fear that Mr. Mallory is being manipulated while under medical supervision. Anonymous. But I could hear his voice behind every word. "Evan," I said quietly. "Of course," Linda replied. "And look, he used a PR agency. They're spreading it through the Browning family's charity network." I exhaled slow and even. He'd escalated to public warfare. Good. He just moved the battle to my battlefield truth and paper trails. "Linda," I said, "call James Holden. I want every financial record for the last decade ready within 24 hours. Payroll taxes, audits, donation receipts, charitable transfers, everything." "On it," she said, "and the hospital has your capacity evaluation ready for release." Perfect. At 2:10 p.m., my attorney arrived with a printed dossier. The cover read, "Cognitive assessment patient Richard Mallory, results 97th percentile." Every chart, every test, every recorded conversation, signed by Dr. Chen and 2 witnesses. I smiled. Let's give him a lesson in evidence. That evening, I opened my own laptop and began drafting my reply, not with bitterness, but precision. It wasn't for LinkedIn. It was for truth. To my friends, partners, and team members, I've seen the statements made about me. While I will not respond to personal attacks, I will say this: my company, Mallory Systems, has always stood for accountability, loyalty, and transparency. Those values don't retire when you turn 72. They get stronger. For those who stayed by my side during recovery, thank you. For those questioning my sanity, rest assured I passed every medical and ethical test. I built this company on trust. I will not let deceit inherit it. Linda hit post. Within minutes, the business world of Dallas lit up. By nightfall, the Dallas Business Journal issued a follow-up insiders rally around founder Richard Mallory amid false manipulation claims. Even the editor called personally to apologize. "We got used, Richard," he said. "But we're printing the retraction tomorrow." I didn't gloat. I just looked out the window at the dark skyline of Dallas, the city I'd helped build, now glowing brighter than the lies around it. And I whispered to myself, he tried to win with words. I'll win with truth. Because truth, once spoken clearly, doesn't argue back. It just stands there, steady, silent, undeniable. By the time dawn broke over Dallas, I wasn't thinking like a father anymore. I was thinking like a man preparing a trial. Evan had chosen the battlefield. Now I'd build the case. At 7:45 a.m., Linda arrived at my apartment with a leather folder thick with papers and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't even bother with small talk. "You said you wanted evidence," she began. "You've got it." She spread spreadsheets across my kitchen table like a prosecutor preparing exhibits. Here's the breakdown. In the last 5 years, Evan's cost to the company, $487,000. Revenue contributed $0. Education, living expenses, car payments, travel allowances, everything documented. I studied the numbers in silence. Each figure was a wound I'd paid for willingly. Now compare that to us. Linda continued, sliding another sheet forward. Carlos' 15 years of service prevented over $90,000 in facility losses, optimized maintenance schedules that saved $40,000 annually. Oliver developed 3 core algorithms that generated $1.3 million net gain. Myself handled expansions that raised annual revenue from $3.2 to $5 million. She looked up, meeting my eyes. Evan took. We built. I nodded. Then let's make sure everyone sees it. At 9:00 a.m., Carlos arrived in his work uniform holding a small notebook and a nervous smile. Senor Richard, I wrote down everything that happened at the hospital. Every day. Every hour. I thought maybe it helps. He opened the notebook, handwritten logs of visits, meals, brought nurses, notes, times of prayer. It was humble, honest, irrefutable. Carlos IV said quietly, "That helps more than you know." Then Oliver came in, laptop under one arm, eyes down as usual. "I brought something too," he murmured. He set a leather-bound journal on the table. The pages were filled with notes, technical ideas, conversations, advice I'd given him over 12 years. Every entry dated, detailed, and human. One note read, April 2019, Richard helped me rehearse for a Google interview even though he knew I might leave. Said real leadership is giving people wings, not cages. I felt something shift in my chest, a mix of pride and grief. "You kept all this?" I asked. "You taught me to document everything," he said with a faint smile. I guess I listened. Linda's laptop chimed. An email had just come in. She froze, then turned the screen toward me. The sender, Evan Mallory. Subject line, urgent family matter. Linda, Carlos, Oliver Dad, is not in his right mind. If you cooperate with me to prove mental incompetence, I'll guarantee your jobs and increase your salaries by 25%. I just need written statements claiming you noticed confusion or erratic behavior. We can solve this quietly. I'll handle everything once I take control. For a long moment, no one spoke. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was corruption, written, time-stamped, undeniable. Linda folded her arms. He thinks loyalty can be bought like flowers for a wedding. Carlos shook his head, disgusted. No honor, no soul. I felt no anger, only finality. He had given me the last missing piece. Forward it to James Holden, I said. And make 3 printed copies. 1 for legal record, 1 for the board, 1 for the meeting. What meeting? Oliver asked. The one where we end this, I said simply. By noon, my apartment had turned into a war room. Stacks of files lined the counter. Medical reports, financial audits, visitor logs, hospital footage. Every fact time-stamped. Every truth armed. Dr. Chen arrived at 1:30 p.m., carrying a sealed envelope. I heard what your son's been saying, she told me. This will stop him cold. Inside were cognitive assessment results, signed, verified, notarized. 97th percentile for reasoning, memory, and comprehension. She looked at me kindly. Richard, you've passed more tests than most men half your age. I smiled. Then let's see how he does on his first. By 3:00 p.m., James Holden had filed a full report with the company's board. At the top, the subject line, Emergency All-Staff Meeting Succession and Ownership Clarification. Every employee would be there, every partner, even the press. And at 10:00 a.m., Tuesday morning, my son would walk into the one room in Dallas where his charm, his smile, and his last name couldn't save him. Because in that room, I wasn't just his father anymore. I was the man he'd underestimated, armed with truth, surrounded by loyalty, and ready to show the world what real legacy looks like. Tuesday, 10:00 a.m. The boardroom of Mallory Systems had never been this full. 52 employees sat shoulder to shoulder. Reporters lined the back wall. 3 cameras from the Dallas Business Journal pointed toward the long mahogany table. At the head of it sat me. No hospital gown this time. Navy suit, white shirt, steady heartbeat. To my right, Linda Carlos and Oliver. To my left, James Holden, my attorney, and Dr. Chen, the physician who tested my mind. The double glass doors opened. Evan walked in. His tuxedo had been replaced with a gray designer suit, but the arrogance stayed the same. Behind him came Alyssa Browning, pale and tight-lipped, and her father, Senator Edward Browning, face carved in stone. Dad Evan began, voice careful. "What is this?" I gestured toward an empty chair across from me. "Sit down," he did, glancing around the packed room. Whispers rippled through the crowd. He wasn't used to being outnumbered by truth. "This is excessive," he muttered. "You could have just called me." "I did," I said evenly. 17 times while I was dying, you never answered. Silence fell heavy as Texas summer heat. I stood slowly leaning on the table with both hands. Today's meeting is about succession and something more important than that character. I nodded to Linda. She opened a folder and began reading aloud. In the last 5 years, Evan Mallory has received $487,000 in financial support from company funds, education, travel, living expenses, and wedding costs. His total revenue contribution to Mallory Systems, 0. A murmur moved through the room. In contrast, Linda continued, Carlos Jimenez's improvements have saved over $130,000 annually. Oliver Brooks's code innovations generated $1.3 million in profit, and my management increased company revenue from $3.2 to $5 million. She closed the folder. Those are the numbers. Evan's jaw clenched. This is humiliating, Dad. You're airing family matters in public. No, I said. You turned family into public business when you made me a headline. I signaled to Oliver. He stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. I kept notes over 12 years, he said, holding up his journal. Everything Richard taught me: how to lead, how to treat people, how to keep promises. He once told me, integrity is what you do when no one's watching. I guess some of us forgot that. The employees nodded quietly. Then Carlos spoke, accent thick with emotion. Mr. Richard gave me a chance when I had nothing. He paid for my daughter's school. When he was sick, I prayed for him every day. His son, he never came. Even the senator looked away. Evan shifted uncomfortably. Are we really turning this into a pity parade? These people work for us, Dad. I straightened. No, Evan. They work with me. You don't work at all. His voice rose. You can't talk to me like that. I'm your son, and I was your father when you needed tuition car payments and luxury. But when I needed you, I pointed toward the ceiling. Room 3212. Empty. You could hear a pin drop. Then James Holden spoke. For the record, he said this meeting also addresses an email sent by Mr. Evan Mallory on Sunday evening. He opened the printed copy and read it aloud, the offer to bribe Linda Carlos and Oliver into fabricating testimony of mental incompetence. Gasps broke across the room. A reporter scribbled furiously. Alyssa covered her mouth. The senator turned red with anger, not at me, but at the man his daughter almost married. Evan stood up suddenly. That email was taken out of context. No, James said flatly. It was time-stamped, signed, and verified. Dr. Chen rose next, holding her clipboard. I've personally evaluated Mr. Mallory. His cognitive assessment ranks in the 97th percentile for his age group. No impairment, no confusion, no sedation influence. She paused. Whoever suggested otherwise has either lied or misunderstood reality. I turned to Evan. So tell us, son. Which one were you? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, jaw-tight eyes darting for escape. I took a deep breath. Then let me finish this for you. I turned to the room. As of last Thursday, my will and corporate structure have been legally amended. 48% of Mallory Systems now belongs to Linda Foster, Carlos Jimenez, and Oliver Brooks. The remaining 52% is held in an employee profit trust, divided annually based on performance. A wave of stunned silence passed through the room. Then applause began, slow and uncertain, growing louder with every second. I raised a hand. The house in Highland Park goes to Linda. The investment portfolio split between Carlos and Oliver. $2 million in life insurance establishes the Mallory Scholarship Fund. And my son, I looked at him not in anger, but with exhausted honesty. My son receives $50,000. The sum total of his loyalty. A reporter whispered, 50,000 out of 5 million, the senator murmured under his breath. He's lucky to get that much. Evan's voice cracked. You can't do this. James Holden replied. He already did. The will's irrevocable, filed and witnessed. I leaned back in my chair. You see, Evan, blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And family, I looked at Linda, Carlos, and Oliver always shows up. Evan pushed back from his chair and walked out without another word. Alyssa followed, tears streaming down her face. The senator stopped at the door, looked back at me and said quietly, Mr. Mallory, I'd have done the same thing. As the door closed, the applause returned louder this time. Not celebration. Recognition. I wasn't losing a son. I was gaining a legacy. 6 months later, Dallas felt different. Or maybe I did. The company that once carried my name now carried a soul. Mallory Systems, no longer a kingdom, but a community. The day the ownership transfer went public, half the city thought I'd lost my mind. Now they call it genius. Revenue up 24%. Employee retention at 100. Clients saying you can feel the pride in every person you talk to. Because ownership changes people, so does gratitude. Linda Foster, now Chief Executive Officer, rebuilt our structure with surgical precision. She paid off the company's last bank loan within 3 months. She leads meetings like I used to, coffee in one hand, no nonsense in the other. But she's kinder than I ever was. Carlos Jimenez, now Director of Operations, turned our office into something human again. He added a daycare for single parents, planted magnolia trees outside the building, and built a scholarship program for the children of immigrant families, funded by profits we never used to share. Every morning he brings in fresh flowers, the same kind he once left at my hospital bed, and Oliver Brooks. He runs our innovation lab, a space that didn't exist until he suggested it. 3 patents pending, 2 already licensed. When investors visit, they're surprised that the quiet man in sneakers is one of the new owners. I'm not. He's been building this company's heart for years. Sometimes I sit in the back of the conference room during Monday briefings, sipping my coffee and saying nothing. They don't need my voice anymore. That's how I know I did it right. As for me, I sold the mansion. Moved into a small apartment overlooking White Rock Lake. One bedroom, one balcony, one chair that creaks when I lean back to watch the sunset. I walk to the office most mornings. People still call me Mr. Mallory, but I prefer Richard. I don't have a chauffeur anymore, no house staff, no penthouse keys. But I have peace, and I've learned that's the real luxury money can't buy. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., I meet Linda Carlos and Oliver in the same boardroom where I once changed my will. We call it family meeting. No titles, no agenda. Just coffee, laughter, and silence that doesn't need fixing. Sometimes Carlos brings soup again. Sometimes Linda tells stories about her daughters. Sometimes Oliver says nothing at all, and that's fine. We've learned that real family doesn't need words every time. Last week I received a letter from Portland. No return address. Just a small handwriting I recognized instantly. Dad, I got a job. Junior marketing associate, $42,000 a year. I'm learning what work feels like when it's yours. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you're okay. Evan, I sat there for a long time reading it again and again. Not to relive the hurt, but to thank God it had meaning now. Growth doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in a plain envelope, no signature, no pride left to hide behind. I didn't write back. Some lessons need silence to echo. But that night, I went down to White Rock Chapel, the little church by the lake. The same one I used to drive past for years, too busy to stop. I lit a candle and whispered the third and final prayer of this long season. Lord, you didn't save my life to keep me comfortable. You saved it to wake me up. Thank you for showing me that love and loyalty aren't always found under the same roof. And thank you for giving me the strength to rebuild without hate. The flame flickered steady and warm, reflecting off the gold cross above the altar. It reminded me of something my wife used to say. A house isn't full because it has people. It's full because it has peace. And for the first time in years, I felt that peace. If you've listened all the way to the end, remember this: blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And sometimes losing what you thought was yours is how God hands you what you were always meant to keep. If this story touched something in you, follow Brian's Stories, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments what loyalty means to you. Because maybe, just maybe, our stories aren't about what we lose, but about how we learn to build again.